Our State of the U.S. segment tonight. Some business leaders are abandoning President Trump following his response to Charlottesville attack. Now, President Trump has scrapped plans for an infrastructure advisory council after two similar councils dissolved this week. So, was the response of these leaders appropriate, or are businesses and CEOs becoming too political? Watch.
I'm amazed to see those CEOs that walked away. If I were a publicly traded CEO today, and I've watched my shares of my company generate the gains that we've seen since January 1st, I would be amazed, especially because we haven't even been talking about this catalyst because the mainstream media doesn't want to talk about it. I think most CEOs should stay in their lane, do what they do best. And I think with Donald Trump, that's what he's doing. The business piece is his lane. He's staying in it. Job growth is absolutely critical. That corporate tax plan is going to stimulate this economy. All of these CEOs who walked away, they're going to be really happy when they start seeing this job creation and the wealth creation in this country. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. But again, I'm reflecting on what he's done year to date since he's been in office. The market has obviously reflected those results. And again, more job creation. You can't argue with the million jobs that's been created.
With me now, attorney and Republican strategist Gayle Trotter. Gayle, President Trump, I just think that this backlash is unwarranted. And I was satisfied with his response to the tragedy in Charlottesville. I think that, I just got what he was saying was that, hey, you know what? There were two sides here, and both of them were bad. Both of them brought violence. Both of them wanted to fight. Some of them were there to protest against the removal of the statue. Okay, there was a couple good guys there, and there's probably a couple good Democrats out there too. Now, for some reason, the left loves to twist his words, and they just want to label him as a racist, as Hitler. This is what they've been doing, since the campaign ever started. So these CEOs, they're either really extremely anti-Trump, which is, I think, part of it, or they're terrified of the loud minority.
Well, Harry Truman used to like to say that if you can't stand the heat, get out of the kitchen. And that's what we're seeing with these business leaders. They are loudly withdrawing from the public arena, and their response in part is due to the public outcry over Charlottesville, but it's also due to another factor that's not really discussed, that there's this AstroTurf effort driven by deep-pocketed individuals and deep state interests that are trying very hard to launch threatening campaigns against these corporations through boycotts, through social media campaigns against these businesses for not doing this mandatory virtue signaling. And that's exactly why these business leaders are doing this public withdrawal from the heat that they see in the kitchen right now. But the truth is, and we all know this, that these businesses are not going to be out of the political discussions. They're just going to start working through their lobbyists behind closed doors in Washington, D.C., and they are not going to have this public leadership role anymore, but they're still going to be involved in the political discussions about the economy going forward.
Definitely. But do you think it was smart of them to excuse themselves from, if you will, the table with Trump? Because again, like the sound that we just heard, they have shareholders and people, that are counting on them to, go and make the best deals. And President Trump alluded to the fact that these CEOs were upset because he called them out, because a lot of their manufacturing's done in other countries and they're creating jobs in other countries, and he's telling them to bring it back home.
Well, these CEOs should be so happy about the 200 days that President Trump and his administration have been working on behalf of the American people. Retail sales had hit a 7-month high in July. We saw that unemployment is the lowest that it's been in 16 years. We see that President Trump has honored his campaign promise of killing over $60 billion worth of job-killing regulations that were put in place under the Obama administration. And if you look at the stock market, we have a booming stock market. We've had 34 days of record highs of the Dow Jones. So this is something that the American people are excited about. And certainly these CEOs, it would behoove them to support the president. But certainly they want to make sure that they do not become targets of this AstroTurf type campaign against their businesses.
And Gayle, what do you make of CEOs also explaining exploiting the tragedy in Charlottesville. We have the Uber CEO, who, by the way, was part of that business advisory council, but he dropped out in February over the pressure from the left. But he released an email, and actually received the email. I'm an Uber customer, and the email says, "We're horrified by the neo-Nazi demonstration that took place in Charlottesville, which resulted in the loss of life of a young woman." And then, at the bottom it goes on to say that, they're not going to give rides to, neo-Nazis. They're going to, move their company away from that. And that everyone has to stand together against hatred and violence. Thank you for making our community one that we can be proud of. So, I think this company has the right to do whatever it wants and to denounce and condemn neo-Nazis and white supremacists and the KKK. That's great. But where were they after the incident at UC Berkeley with Antifa? Where were they after the massacre in Dallas of the police officers that was committed by somebody who was inspired by Black Lives Matter? Where were they after the inauguration of President Donald Trump? I was there. I was harassed by Antifa. It would have been nice to see this email after those times.
Some Americans might observe that these CEOs are not profiles in courage, and that perhaps they have stuck their interest into this conversation for their own agenda. But as you said, they are private companies, and the customers can do the best response to this. If they agree with what the CEOs are doing, they can continue to frequent these businesses. If they don't agree with what the CEOs are doing, they can take their business elsewhere. And ultimately, it's up to the consumer to decide if they want CEOs weighing in on these conversations, and their numbers will reflect their positions.
I just feel like they should just totally stay out of politics because, we have half the country that thinks one way, the other half that thinks the other way. And for them to do this isn't smart. We saw Starbucks, their stocks went down after, they have gotten so involved politically. We saw Target, their stocks went down after they got involved with the transgender bathroom issue. And Lyft, after Trump's travel order, Lyft sent a ridiculous email, one that I responded to. They were standing up against Trump's travel order. And I wrote them back and I said, you know what? Trump's travel order is trying to keep us safe. And so I wrote them back and I said, I'm offended that you were sending out this email. And you know what they wrote me back? They wrote me back basically, no. This is what they wrote me back. I have the email up here on the screen. It says, "We understand that individuals have different views on the recent executive action taken by President Trump regarding refugees and immigrants from certain countries. While Lyft believes that these actions are anti-ethical to our core values, we nonetheless respect whatever decision regarding Lyft you feel is appropriate." So basically, they told me to go screw off. And so I deleted their app.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Right, and that's certainly the case. You did exactly what I'm talking about. So customers can see the virtue signaling that these companies and their CEOs are doing, and they can decide, is this something that promotes freedom and liberty and respect for all people and the dignity of human beings? Or is it something that is antithetical to the values of the customer? And that's for each of us, and that's the beauty of living in a free market society, is that unlike Bernie Sanders, who only wanted us to have 3 types of deodorant, we can have 20, and we can decide which type of deodorant and the company that stands behind it reflects our values and our personal preferences. And that is the beauty of being an American citizen.
Yeah, maybe I wouldn't mind the political lecture so much if it were more balanced, but there is no balance. It's all liberals. And even if they're not liberals, they're so afraid of that silent minority and, the grab your wallet people that they just bow down whether it's right or wrong. And, I don't want a political lecture where I spend money, Gail. I don't know about you, but that's me for sure.
No.
Thanks for your insight.